Good evening and welcome to back to my channel. Sorry that it's been so long since I did a Bible study, but I had to have surgery back in December and I had surgery on my mouth, so it took a while to heal, but I am back and we are going to pick up where we left off. So I'm going to start with the book of Esther, and we're going to start tonight on chapter 2. But before we start, let's go ahead and say a word of prayer. Our precious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love and your mercy. Lord, as we take and we read your words here tonight, I pray that you would be with me and that you would show me what you would have me to receive out of your word. And I pray that you would help me to glorify you and be a blessing to others. In your precious name we do pray. Amen. Okay, I'm going to start by reading, start with Esther 1. It says, after these things, when the wrath of King Xerxes was appeased, he remembered Vestella and what she had done and what was decreed against her. In other words, after King Xerxes calmed down and and sobered up, he remembered what Vestella had done and what had been decreed against her. And once a decree was made, it could not be rescinded. Another decree could be made over top of that decree, but he could not go back on the decree that he had already made. Then said the king's servant that ministered unto him, let there be fair young virgins sought for the king. So here his men are saying, bring the virgin women to the king so that he can pick himself out a new queen. Sorry, bear with me. I got a new pair of glasses and I can see far away, but I can't see close up, so I have to take my glasses off in order to read. And let the king appoint officers in all the province of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of he, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let their things for purification be given them. And I did some research to see what all of this meant. And what this means is the servant who had told him to issue the decree said, bring the fair young virgins to the king. The king appointed men to bring him all the fair ladies of the land to him. So he appointed men to bring these women that were the virgins to him. And let the maidens which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vestella. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shemiel, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. The women who pleased the king the most would replace Vestella as the queen. Mordecai was a Benjamite who had been captured with Babylon, defeated the Israelites. Was captured by Babylon when Babylon was defeated by the Israelites. Mordecai was a Jew, even though the Jews had been captured 100 years earlier. They had freedom and were even allowed positions within the government. So even though they had been captured in Babylon when Israel was taken over, when Babylon, defeated Israel, even though they were captured, they were allowed to be free, and they were allowed to have positions, and they were even allowed to have positions of authority of the government. And Mordecai had a position of authority. Who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up I'm not good with all these names. Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So she was his niece, and when her parents died, he took her as if she was his own daughter. So it came to pass, when the king's commandments and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. Esther's mother and father had been dead, so Mordecai had raised her as his own daughter. So when all the virgin women were brought to King Ahasuerus, Esther was among the women that were brought to the king's house. Okay, let's continue reading. So it came to pass, when the king's commandments and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to this custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens which were meant to be given her out of the king's house, and he purified her and her maidens unto the best place of the house of the women. The king cared for Esther, and he was kind to her, and gave her 7 maidens. Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. So she had not shown that she was a Jew, because Mordecai had told her not to show that she was of the Jews. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house, to know how Esther did and what should become of her. Esther had not made it known that she was a Jew, because Mordecai had told her not to say she was a Jew, and to keep quiet until she had won the right to be heard. So he told her, just for her to remain quiet until she earned the right for her to be heard, and then to speak. As followers of Christ, we need to learn when to be quiet and when to be heard. We need to listen to others, even non-believers, and give everyone respect. Sometimes when you listen to a non-believer, you can find out why that person is a non-believer. I'm going to college currently, and one of the classes that I'm taking, I just finished, was apologetics. And one thing that it taught us in apologetics is, for a non-believer, don't come at them with a bunch of biblical scriptures and where you're wrong in what you believe in, or that you'll never win anybody to Christ by attacking their religion. The way to win people to Christ is you ask questions. Even non-believers, even believers that don't believe in anything, you ask them questions to learn why they believe what they believe, and then you listen to them and show them respect. As Christians, we are to show Christ's love in anything and everything that we do. You know, there's a saying that says that you're the only Bible that some people will ever read, and that is so true. As Christians, we need to show a positive example of Christ's love. All right, let's go ahead and pick up where we left off. And Mordecai, I read that. Now, when every maid's turn was come to go in to King Xerxes, after that she had been 12 months according to the manner of women. The days of their purification accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. And I want you to know that when I read the scriptures, I look and find different biblical references as to what certain scriptures mean, especially if it's something I don't understand. I will really look deep and dive deep into it and find out what it means. And I've also incorporated the apocrypha, which was the which was in the Bible until 1534. So until the year 1534, it was illegal to print the King James Bible without including the apocrypha. So I have included the apocrypha because the book of Esther has scriptures. It has 7 passages that are not in the current King James Bible, but was in the King James Bible before 1534. And I felt like I needed to include those so that we can get a whole picture of the entire story, which, as the King James Bible is now, it says the book of Esther is the only book where the word God's never mentioned. However, in the Apocrypha, God is mentioned twice. God is mentioned where Mordecai prays to God to intervene and intercede in what's going on, and then also they pray to it says that they prayed to God once again, to where they would know what Mordecai would know what Esther needed to do. So the Apocrypha includes that, yes, that that God was mentioned also in the book of Esther. All right, let me go ahead and read some more to you. Mordecai walked in the court every day to make sure that Esther was okay. So the reason that he was walking into the courts is because he was worried about Esther, among all the people and among all the virgins, because the virgins and these women were not free to go and do as they pleased. They were pretty much in captivity, and if the king did, if he didn't care for a woman, then she pretty much had a very dull and boring life. Okay, during the year before each young woman turned to go to the king, the harem regulations required the women to receive beauty treatment with oil or myrrh for 6 months, and then with perfumes and cosmetics for another 6 months. So before they went to the king, they had a year of purification to where they received different beauty aids. Like I said, they received oil and myrrh for 6 months, and then with perfumes and cosmetics for 6 months. So this was a requirement before they were, presented to the king for his enjoyment. Okay, let's go ahead and pick up where we left off. Then thus came every maiden unto the king, whosoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women, to the custody of Shagaz the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she was called by name. So in other words, the women came into the king, And then if he was delighted in them, he might call them back. But if he was not delighted in them, then they would never see the king again. And like I said, they would have a very boring life because they were basically required to stay there. They weren't allowed, they were taken from their homes, whether they wanted to be taken from their homes or not. So not all these women were willing to go to to be virgins for the king. I mean, he the decree called to round them up, whether they were willing to go or not. They were made to go, according to the research that that I've done on this. I want y'all to know that before I do a passage, or when I read a chapter and break it down, I take hours. I mean, the one time, I mean, actually for this particular passage for the chapter 2, I studied and looked stuff up for 6 hours before I present this information to anyone, because I want to make sure that what I'm presenting to you is true and that there are no fallacies in anything that I'm presenting to you, because I want to be a messenger for God. I don't want to present anything to anybody that is not truly authentic and a message from God. And in any case, if there's ever a time that I accidentally do that, I will definitely, if I find out that what I said or what I told you was not true, I will definitely let you know, hey, I'm human. I'm gonna make mistakes. We all make mistakes. So if I do say something that I find out later, no, that's not how it was, then I will definitely let you know that, hey, I made a mistake when I said such and such. So I just want you to know that, I research this stuff very thoroughly before I present it to anyone. And the reason that I read from a notebook is because I write everything down ahead of time, and I want to make sure that I don't miss anything when I'm actually reading and presenting it to you. So that's why I use my notebook. These young virgins were taken from their, like I said, they were taken from their homes and required to live in separate buildings near the palace. Their sole purpose was to serve the king and wait for his call for sexual pleasure. They rarely saw the king, and their lives were restricted and boring. Go ahead and pick up where I left off. We're going to pick up on chapter 15, on verse 15. Now, when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing, but what Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keepers of the women, appointed, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. Everyone that looked at the king fell in love with Esther. She didn't show concern or fear like the other women did. She didn't require artificial beauty. She was naturally beautiful, and she was most acceptable. So she didn't require the 6 months of the cosmetics and the oil and the myrrh and the other things that the other women required, because she was just naturally beautiful. So Esther was taken unto the king Ahasuerus into his house, royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. In other words, the king fell in love. He fell in love with Esther, and he made her his queen. He loved her more than all the other women. All right, let's go ahead and pick up where we left off, which is on 18. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast, And he made a release to the province and gave gifts according to the state of the king. The king made a great feast and invited all his princes and his servants. So he invited, all the people that had been there previously when he had gotten drunk and wanted Vastilla to, to come and, basically show off her beauty to him. So he had invited the princes for the feast that he had, showing that he was, that he had made Esther the queen. And back in those times, according to what I had read earlier in chapter 1, the feast could last for months. Okay, let's go ahead and pick back up, which is on verse 20. Esther had not yet shown her kindred nor her people as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther did the commandments of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. So she obeyed Mordecai. What Mordecai told her to do, she did, just like she did when he was bringing her up and raising her. In those days, when Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the doors, were wroth and sought to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus. So he heard that these two men intended to kill the king. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. In other words, Mordecai told Esther that these two men intended to kill the king, and then Esther told the king that Mordecai had told her that these two men intended to kill the king. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of Chronicles before the king. In other words, he found out that what Mordecai was saying was true, and that they did intend to harm the king. So the king had them hung, and then he had it written in a book that he had that Mordecai was the one that had told, told Esther, which told him that, that they intended to kill him. So Mordecai was the one that saved his life. So he had written it down that Mordecai had saved his life. Okay, so that's all for chapter 2. I will go ahead and I will be beginning chapter 3. It may not be next weekend. It may be the following weekend. I'm not promising that I will do this every week, because I am going to college to get my associates in biblical studies. So there will be times that I won't be able to do it every Sunday night. But I will try to at least do two chapters a night. 2 chapters a month. Sorry about that. 2 chapters a month. I appreciate you being with me tonight. God bless you, and you have a great week. Thank you.